be too difficult, for those who haven't been able to join us on time to scroll back and use technology to get to the beginning. So it is a great pleasure for me to welcome each and every one of you today to this fireside chat that explores how inner and outer transformation are two sides of the same coin. And our intention with this podcast or fireside chat, whatever you want to call it, is to challenge the perception that we have in our own heads and perception of the world. There is a separation between our inner life and what we perceive on the outside. And so after defining the terms, as to what is consciousness, what is transformation, what is systems change, we will examine how human consciousness awareness shapes and is shaped by system change, by this notion of nature, the nature of reality. And so Charly, who is my deep friend and longtime friend, 25 years we've known each other, will give practical examples from his own life and a successful journey in integrating the interior transformation with the exterior manifestation. And so it's a great pleasure to welcome him on this call. But before we go into introducing him, I would like to talk a little bit about the logistics. We will spend the first 30 minutes, by my asking questions of Charly, him answering them. And I would kindly ask you, each and every one of you, to mute yourself. And until we open the session for questions, and then you can unmute you. This way we'll have a proper recording and don't get disturbed by exterior noises. So my name is Mariana Bozesan. I've been a member of the Club of Rome since 2012. And I, like Charly, I'm an artificial intelligence and computer scientist major. I have a PhD in consciousness studies, and I've been a serial entrepreneur turned investor. And one important aspect that connects me with the Club of Rome is the initiation of the investment turnaround with Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker and Anders Wickmann, the co-presidents at the time of the Club of Rome, and with the intention to use investment to implement the UN SDGs within the planetary boundaries, which is what connects me deeply with Charly. So also on the inside, I have a meditation practice of 45 years, and I've been a closet mystic for the largest part of that. So, but today I have the great pleasure to introduce Charly Kleissner, a very dear friend of mine, who is also a serial entrepreneur turned investor, actually impact investor, and he believes that the deeper meaning of life and of wealth, rather, is to make a positive contribution to humanity and the planet. So he has. He's looking back to a very successful career in Silicon Valley. He worked, among others, with and for Steve Jobs and many other extraordinary joint friends. And after exiting corporate America, he started founding the K.L. Felicitas Foundation and the Social Impact International to help social entrepreneurs worldwide to accelerate and to increase their impact in the world. He's also the founder of Tonic and the 100% Impact Network, which is a global network of impact investors. And I could go on forever. His CV has many pages, but I'd rather hand over to him. He is also a computer scientist by education with a focus on artificial intelligence, a degree that he earned in Vienna many, many decades ago. So, Charly, welcome to this fireside chat. And I'd like to start with the first question. As the Silicon Valley executive, they are not very well known for working on their interiority, their spirituality. How come have you arrived at that point in or that notion in your life?
Well, thank you so much, Mariana. And, it's going to be challenging to cover everything in such a deep topic. And so I will throw out a few ideas and experiences that I've had with the intention that you can pick it up and then go deeper either in our conversation or later. And maybe you can also reflect in the chat what touches you and what not. And I wonder, why you show up today, but you must have an interest in inner transformation and outer transformation. Otherwise, you probably would not be interested in this topic. You see, Mariana, when I was growing up in Innsbruck in the Alps, I felt a very deep connection to nature. As a matter of fact, I felt one with the mountains when I went into the mountains and did all this stuff that people in the Alps do when they grow up 60 years ago there. And then I studied computer science, very much on the left brain side, as opposed to the holistic being in nature as part of nature. And yet, all the way through my youth and then even my career in Silicon Valley, I had these experiences, that are not explainable by a rational mind. And I always wondered why is nobody talking about this at that point in time? Now people are indeed. But I had deep outer body experiences, for instance, in my 20s, which totally convinced me that I'm not my body because I was outside my body. That was my truth, and that is my truth and my experience. And therefore, I thought, well, who am I then if I'm not my body, right? And I was able to communicate with my deceased grandmothers. You didn't talk about this at that point in time, not in language, but with communication. Language is a lot of times the concepts of inner transformation are beyond language. Or when I moved to Silicon Valley, channeling happened to me, like to so many creatives, composers, and painters. They always credit somebody else depending on what their spirituality is. They have different names for that, but it's really accessing something beyond your own ego, what Otto Scharmer calls the ego. And so I had all these experiences that created the deep desire in myself to explore that part of who I am much more. And when I stepped off the Silicon Valley train, so to speak, I really dove much deeper into what's called mindfulness practices. And mindfulness practices are a way for working on your inner transformation. And that creates then a level of awareness and consciousness that goes deeper than if you don't do these mindfulness practices. And maybe last not least, to start our conversation, I am in Honolulu, Hawaii, and in working with the indigenous people here, and and really seeing the difference between where a lot of us in the global north ended up, I would say, confusing things, but because of lack of knowledge, not because of lack of intention, and and how they are holding this inner soul, if you wish, which is not different than the land that they live on and the community that they're in. And so my approach towards deeper awareness and mindfulness practices has been in the works since I was roaming the mountains.
Wow, that's beautiful. And since I'm spending a lot of time myself, our last intermezzo together when you moderated me happened in Innsbruck, a beautiful, beautiful place. So let me make sure that I summarize correctly what you just said. So your out of body experience or the connection with nature gave you a deeper understanding that you are not your body, that there is a difference between the subject of consciousness and the object of consciousness. So, which I don't know how many of you in this call or listening later or have an understanding about this, but this is an extremely important recognition. We are not our thoughts, we have thoughts. And once we have this wisdom in our head, then we stepped aside from what is happening in front of us, what the people put in front of us, what happens to us, and have a more wisdom in the way we act in the world. Is this correct, Charly?
That's correct. And so just like if you practice mindfulness with your awareness and play around with who is paying attention, where is that located at, you will be led down the fact that you're not just your body, right? And when you go down in your mindfulness practices into meditation and reflection and being in nature, and like you said, exploring how your thoughts are moving in and out of your consciousness, then you realize that you're not your thoughts. And that's a fundamental realization, because then the question is, who are you really? And that's an exploration that the inner transformation allows you to do, and to get into spaces of eventually. Let me just go deeper in order to see where we want to go in our discussion. Most people who practice mindfulness eventually experience the what I would call the ultimate universal laws. And I didn't discover them. They are there for people to tune in if they so choose. It's not my thing. It's a channel that you can tune in, and that's the universal oneness and universal love. And once you experience that, then you actually know on a deeper level that you're not outside the beautiful manifestation of what our senses portray to our brain of what's happening outside. And you would not possibly be able to hurt all of that, or to, well, knowingly, let's put it that way, because we edge into the system's constraints all the time and participate in hurting the systems. But at least, you have that level of awareness, which the indigenous people never lost. And that is, and it's a very personal journey. So think about, you know, your body, and the way that you train your body is how you train your body. It would not necessarily work for me, right? Because I'm a different age, I'm whatever. I want to exercise it differently. And similarly with your mind, we all train our mind. That my mind has a PhD in computer science, as has yours, so it's kind of confused on that level. But by going deeper into mindfulness, you keep it in check. And we have different ways of training our mind, and so does everybody has a different way of exploring their inner transformation. Whatever works for you might not work for me or not. And we have to approach that, Mariana, with a lot of humbleness, with a lot of, it's not us, being better or anything. It's just we're able to go a little deeper in our level of awareness than most people who don't do these practices are able to do that. And that has consequences, just like it has consequences for your body and your mind of what you do. And so this is an invitation to all of you and all of us, if you're interested in that topic, to actually explore it. And one more thing around that is, this is not an intellectual exercise. It's actually hard work on yourself. And if it's not uncomfortable to a certain extent, then you're not making progress. And I'm working with many different deep impact circles, around the globe, to explore that soul compass of who we really are, not who we think we are, and going into that deeper layer of exploration. And then, of course, it shows up in our outer work. And so I don't. So where do we
Right.
want to go
So
from here?
yes, well, that's key, because I think it's important to spend a little time on this, because everyone, we come from extremely different cultures. And when there is disarray between us, ourselves as humans, that's because we have a different understanding, or association with the words that we're using. So what you just said was is very well known, like yoga, unity consciousness in the Indian wisdom traditions. And the universe is called universe, one song. So we're all one if we only go beyond our thinking. So what you just said may seem new for the Westerners, but it's been embedded in the oldest cultures. So whether it's the Chinese or the Indian or the Christian tradition, it's all well known. And so I'm deeply grateful for you asking to do this topic. So
And
coming
maybe,
back
maybe,
to
maybe, maybe Mariana, on that one, the shamans all over the world, in Siberia, all the way from Siberia to the Amazon, have known this too for
Yes.
8, 9, 10,000 years, as far as we know. And when Lisa and I were in Sri Lanka at the big tsunami, not a single elephant died, but hundreds of Sri Lankans died because they lost their sense of what's coming. And nobody can explain really. It's not with your eyes and your ears, but with sensing of being part of nature, how that works. And here in Hawaii, there's a lot of shamans still in the alpine tradition where I'm from. My mom talked about the shamans back then that they had, right? And we lost that to a certain extent. And here they call the responsibility of being human. So being human comes with responsibility. It's not a free ride. They call it kuleana. And kuleana is the responsibility that we as humans have towards, in Hawaiian, Aina, the land, and the community. And as in every indigenous tradition, it's a two-way street. This responsibility is a privilege that we need to carry. And I feel, for one, very privileged to be able to do what I'm doing. And almost never forget that. Sometimes the ego kicks in, but then I usually realize it. And that's and so that's really not something new, as you point out. It's just something that we can access. And I was struggling a little bit about 20 years ago when I started going deeper into the inner transformation as opposed to the shamanic outer transformation, how to combine these two. Because if you go deeper into who you really are, and yet I feel the energies outside in the systems that I'm trying to change. And I think there is a beautiful integration of these. And that's what many call the cosmic dance of inner and outer in the Vedanta tradition and shamanic traditions. And the systems changers, I think, need to explore the inner part of the dance because they know how to dance the outer one. But it's a dance without a partner. Is not resulting in anything meaningful or beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly why, well, we met at one such meditation retreat many decades ago, where you and Lisa, your wife, and my husband and I were also trying to learn the ways of doing it. And so now you brought it up and you speak about mindfulness practice that helps you do the cosmic dance amongst with yourself, because we're always day in and day out being tempted to focus on the outside, on the object of consciousness rather than on the subject. So tell us a little bit about your practice. How
Yeah,
What is the practice that helps you maintain this dance and not get caught up in the day-to-day
yeah.
other people's agenda, or even your own mind, agenda of your own mind, rather than the integration between the heart and the mind?
Yeah, thanks for this question. And if there's interest in going deeper, I'm happy to then even go explain it more what I do. And again, with the caveat that this might or might not work for you, and you need to discover your own way of what works for you. Now, but there are mindfulness practices that have been practiced for partially thousands of years, like yoga and meditation, and then being in nature, journaling, doing some sports without getting too carried away with it, are all journaling, are all access to all give you all access in going deeper in exploring who you are. When I started doing that with more rigor, it was about 25 years ago. Even so, I did, like I said, my hikes in the mountains were meditation hikes, right? And so you can explore in nature how you are in nature very well. But then I explored yoga, meditation in the early 2000s, and shamanism and Buddhism and the Vedanta, and read up on these things and took some courses where we met. And and it helped me on my own journey of developing what I call my soul compass, who I really am. And that's what I work with many different impact circles, deep impact circles, and to answer the questions of who am I really? What do I really, really want? Where do I want to be when I'm 80 or in 20 years? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Things my values. Many of you do that already. It's just a more organized way of doing it and documenting it, and then revisiting it. And then I learned, I unlearned to be a manager, a successful manager. I unlearned what success actually means. And I started believing and experimenting with and getting the benefits of intuition, of emergence, of feedback loops, of paying attention to synchronicities, of not thinking that I'm the super manager who can plan out the outcomes that I desire. And by doing so, a whole new world opened up for me about 20 years ago. And I've ever since that I've always used these types of practices to maintain to expand the openness of this world, and my own participation in that. And that's more important now than ever. So I want I almost think that I was born for this moment, because it's such an interesting moment in time where systems are breaking down right and left, and openings are occurring, right and left. And if you're not prepared to go into these openings, then you will be a victim of these turbulences, and you will not be able to see what's really going on, the beauty of evolutionary a pressure. Yet it's very painful for so many people, and make no mistake, it's a lot of suffering happening too. And yet I'm not so much feeling and sensing the breakdowns of our social fabric and the systems that we have built, but I'm feeling the birth of the new system. It is being birthed right now, and for those of us who are being called to be midwives in that process, I would suggest, without mindfulness practices, it's very hard to show up centered, to show up peaceful, to show up joyfully, to show up seeing the beauty of it all, as opposed to only the despair and the anxiety and the fear. And that's what I got out of the last 25 years. I feel I'm very well equipped for the times being. I'm glad that the major disruption has started happening, and I'm here to contribute to helping the new system to emerge.
Wow. Brilliant. So, the beauty and the unity, the yoga. So, before, you are a book of accomplishments on the outside and the systemic change, but I still want to know something. I mean, it's like with working out. It's not enough to go out, and work out for one time and then, oh my God, I'm glad that's over for the rest of my life. I don't have to work out, which many people may think that, but it doesn't work. So with mindfulness practices, can you give us a little, like a small, tiny percentage out of your day? How much
Hmm.
time do you spend out of your waking life
Hmm.
in
Yeah,
practicing, whatever it is? It could be
yeah.
conversation, journaling, all the stuff that you mentioned, so that people get an idea, just like eating healthy foods.
So that's a really good, insightful question. When I started experimenting more rigorously with different mindfulness practices, I approached it from my head first. So I did yoga from my head, almost meditation too in the beginning, because I'm just a heady guy. And and it took me with yoga maybe 1.5, 2 years to start feeling my body doing the asanas, as opposed to my mind telling my body to do the asanas, right? It's like being in that flow state, which is a window of opportunity to look into the global consciousness. And we all have experienced that. And then about 10 years or 15 years ago, I, I really wanted to experience mindful living off the mat, if you wish, off the cushion, and started, who wrote the book, from ecstasy to agony, or after the bliss, the dishwasher happens, whatever, Sam Harris or somebody. And so I'm practicing mindfulness with whatever I do now, and I'm not always I'm getting into other states as well, so I'm not constantly experiencing that type of state. But and I use sitting and concentrated mindfulness practices to augment that and to remind myself, okay, about the deeper aspects of it. My current meditation practice is focused around gratitude, around awareness. I'm meditating a lot about accessing the global awareness as opposed to going beyond my own ego and see what happens there. I do want to visit my mom. She's in Austria, 96 years old, right? And with my soul, and yeah, have some glimpses of it, but I'm not able to do that reliably yet, and she doesn't really feel it yet. So working on it's a street of exploring. It's a path that ends with the death of your body and your mind, and so it never ends. Right, to your point. And once you explore one layer of the onion, a different one appears, and you're called into going in exploring in exploring that. And that's a beautiful process of life leading to what they call death. Which is just a beautiful gateway into what the mystery of the next thing that we explore as a soul. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that, because I can clearly feel the energy that you're putting across. So now let's go back to the original, outer impact of your inner transformation that I mentioned. I mentioned Tonic, I mentioned Felicitas Foundation, I mentioned, the social work that you're doing. How have these various organizations that you started changed over time? First of all, how did you start? Why did you start together with Lisa? And you're lucky, and I can speak for myself. You're lucky to have a partner who plays along. It's much more difficult if you don't. But how have these several organizations changed over time, starting with 25 years ago and to what you're doing today? How
Mm-hmm.
can you tell the difference in terms of the
Yeah.
systemic impact?
So mindset shift, sometimes it's called, right? When you explore mindfulness, inner transformation, then a shift happens. And some people refer to that as mindset shift. And you can explore that for yourself. And then, of course, a mindset shift has to happen on the organizational level as well and the societal level in order to make the big transformation happening. So my high level theory of change on that one, just to be clear to all the people who are listening in today or online later, I think that I know for myself, not for yourself, but I know for myself that the impact of my life is a direct expression of my soul, of who I am on that level, not who I think I am. And similarly, I believe that the trajectory of humanity is a direct expression of humanity's consciousness. So it's up to us. If we create our future, right? I mean, that's how the future is coming into being. We're calling it in. And if we call in the quote unquote the wrong future, well, it's up to us, right? I mean, and it's up to the consciousness of humanity to develop the future that we deserve based on the consciousness that we have. And so, since that's quite challenging these days, I decided that the purpose of my life for the rest of my life is to help elevate that consciousness of humanity to a better level, such that we can actually do the transformation. I believe the transformation of our fundamental systems, including the economic and the financial system, but not only those, without that level of consciousness will not be possible. So if you agree with that, or if you follow that intellectually, then you have to ask the question: well, how do you contribute to the elevation of the consciousness of humanity? Well, one is this call, right? I think, but another one is you need to work on yourself in order to show up, in order to be able to co-create and to provide a vision and containers. We have all this language that's going beyond the linear thinking of and the reductionist thinking that John Fullerton and others so brilliantly point out, and that requires that level of consciousness and awareness. Otherwise, you get stuck in your head, and then nice head things. I like to exercise my mind as well. It has, like I said, a PhD in computer science. I like good discussions, but good discussions without making a contribution to real change is not sufficient for me at my life anymore. And so that's really, I think the combination. And for that instance, I've co-founded an organization called Twist, which stands for Together We Invest for Systems Transformation, to explore this topic in a very integrated way. And to answer your questions, a lot of organizations get stuck in not being able to do the mindset shift that's necessary in order to move beyond. And I think that a leading indicator of systems change is the capacity of the backbone organizations that are leading that change. If these backbone organizations are led by conventional managers, nothing will happen that's systemic in nature. If they're led by people who understand how to create these containers, how to co-create, how to look for emergence, how to pay attention to feedback loops, how to be inclusive as opposed to divisive, then we have a chance of actually doing that. And that's again where the inner and the outer are so intricately together that if an organization that doesn't know how to do that because its leaders are stuck in the old world, not because they're bad people, but they haven't experienced it yet, then we cannot expect the change to happen. And so with Twist, with everything that I do now, I try to do the integrated way, but it's tough, because people are not used to that. And people are coming, there's a lot of consciousness people coming in, and they almost don't want to talk about the outer world and the systems change. And there's a lot of great systems change work happening, and yet people are hesitant to say we need to change ourselves. And yet even Western science has proven to Einstein over 100 years ago that the observer creates the observed. Without the observer, he said, nothing is there that we know of. It's just a soup of entanglement, right? And then it materializes, just like the future materializes because of our intention, of our consciousness, of our awareness. And so that's the call of our times. And I feel the urgency of actually not fighting one particular administration or the other, but actually creating the consciousness that makes these administrations superfluous at best, or that we don't allow them to happen anymore.
Yes, so thank you. Before I open up the questions to the other participants, I have one more question for you. You've known now the Club of Rome for quite some time. How would you suggest unifying ourselves? Because we are a bunch of extraordinary intellectuals, all big achievers, and we keep fighting like cats and dogs. And I see the messages online, and so before we could, and I keep bringing on love, and we're all one, and so on, but there's no response to that. The only things that go in the email is one trying to top the other with a better argument. So from your perspective and your
Yeah.
experience, how would you suggest getting us together, and maybe suggestions to our presidents in order to begin the process of interior transformation toward unification?
A great question. And any organization, any network, is not normalized around their experiences as individuals on that level. And it's also true, on an individual level that the deeper conversations about consciousness are not necessarily fruitful for people who don't have an interest in exploring that, right? Because they will use it as this is nice, esoteric, and it is, but they will not be able to go deeper. And we cannot expect them to go deeper unless they want to do that themselves. If they want to go deeper, then there's an opening, and there's lots of tools. We talked about some of them, lots of experiences, lots of connections that we can help them do that with. And we can help them.
Presencing.
Yes, Presencing Institute. Within Twist, we start using his language and say awareness-based systems transformation. To go beyond the divisive language of inner and outer, or esoteric language. In any case, so if people don't want to explore that part of who they are, which is fine, right? Then there's nothing we can do to help them. If they do want, then they can. So the people in any organization, be it a club of Rome or not, who are not willing to explore that and have a preconceived notion of what's right for them, and we all have that, we all have our biases, then there's not much we can do. We should, and maybe there's a subgroup within the Club of Rome that actually wants to go deeper, and with that we can do deep impact circles, we can explore, all of that. I would not expect, the majority of Club of Rome members to be interested in that. Maybe they are, and if they are, wonderful. Then we should do it. There's easy ways in, to exploring that topic. And what I hope to do is maybe inspire reflections on some people's parts, to reflect, why is it that we're fighting? Why is it that we haven't come with activities, that we haven't done activities that result in real change? Why is it that we cannot stand for this truth that we can all tune in and pretend that we are just a big tent for anybody and everybody? I think we need to stand for the future that we want to explore. I think we need to be explicit about that. I think we need to agree on that future, and then it's up to materialize it, right? And maybe that's a good exercise, in to be self-critical. Let's say in the finance track, I don't see a lot of desire to go deeper than exploring, the old financial tools, and with a few twists, if you wish. And that's not good enough in my opinion. And so I would urge us, our community, to go deeper, to challenge, not just the methodologies, but the ontologies of who are we, what is our worldview. AI cannot do that. AI can only hold one ontology, or the epistemology of what is the truth. How much can we actually? What's our opinion on that as a platform? And we see that we are not of one opinion, but we should explore that. And I think the major mistake of impact investing over the last 25 years is it only created the methodologies without really asking the deeper questions. And I'm not the only one formulating it that way. I think we're all discovering that, not all, but many are discovering that from different angles, and the current disruption is helping us actually understanding that. And so what is our worldview? What was it 50 years ago when the Club of Rome started? I think we had one. I'm not, the worldview seems to be that we're an open tent for anybody. Okay, that's okay. I mean, we don't want to push anybody out, but it's not sufficient. It's okay, but not sufficient. And inner transformation, and challenging ourselves on what it means to show up as humans, and what can we contribute with our privilege that we all have to the evolution of humanity towards more complexity and more realizing its own destiny, which is in service of the planet and humanity.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for this first part. So those of you who have questions, why don't you unmute yourself and ask them? Who wants to go first? Carlos, you're a very dear friend who I know thinks along the same lines. John?
This is a provocation from you, Mariana.
It is a provocation from you, from me, Carlos.
Well, first of all,
a positive one, though. No provocation. A love declaration.
I know. I have no doubt. So first of all, Charly and Mariana, thanks for organizing this conversation, and thank you, Charly, for your openness in explaining, because I think it's not obvious, not trivial to share what you have shared with people. I mean, I think most of us, if not all, but still, you did that in a very open and way, which I appreciate a lot. I want to mention that Jude Curivan is with us, and John Fullerton, and John will speak later. So we have having a parallel thread on this idea of the convergence between modern science and ancient sciences, or the incredible intuitions of ancient traditions in many different places in the world. You spoke about worldviews. there is in many ways modern science is just rediscovering things that we know since the beginning of times, in different cultures and in different worldviews. So we are also working on that. I'm not sure though. I mean, Mariana is mentioning. I mean, I'm all for working more closely together in the Club of Rome, being more open and in the work with this spirit, really open spirit of collaboration instead of fighting each other. At the same time, I think this requires, as you are also saying, Charlie, different ways to the recognition and the respect of different ways of developing these deeper learnings. I want to use the word learnings, which connects us to No Limits to Learning, and Before It Is Too Late, the call for a human revolution by Aurelio Peccei and Daisaku Ikeda. In that book, Aurelio Peccei doesn't become a Buddhist to say something, but they have incredible conversations between him and Daisaku Ikeda, who was a Buddhist, on this idea of the human revolution. So even for that, I don't see necessarily a need for unification. We can have the feeling that we are all part of a whole and we are all interconnected and interdependent without having to reduce our worldviews to one perspective or one vision, because that one, this idea of one has also the risk in it, but that's my personal perspective of being the one of universalism, and Barbara Cassin says the universal is always the universal of somebody. So, in this room, there is a very high weight of some cultures and not others. So, if we had, and I think we have to have dialogues across very different cultures, we would probably realize that, yes, there are many different worldviews. Yes, there might be the recognition of interdependence and build from there, while not necessarily while the path does not necessarily be the same for everybody, as you also say, Charlie. So as you also say very well. So thank you. Basically,
Well,
that's what I had to say.
thank you, Carlos. So I'd like to hand over to John. Hi, John. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Hey, Charlie, that was wonderful. We've had so many conversations. I wanted to share with you because you were so vulnerable, something I've never said to you, which is that when you got sick prior to your health crisis, I experienced you with a lot more ego. And post your health crisis, you've blossomed into this much more ego-free version of Charlie. And so I guess question one is curious for your reflection on that. And then question two, well, that's question one. Comment one is, and I'd love not just you, but I think Jude in particular would have a view on this. For me, there's sort of two things that are distinct. There's the inner outer thing, and then there's also the reductionist holistic thing. And both of those are necessary to meet the polycrisis or an awareness and a working with them. So I'm curious how you hold those two different things or whether you see them as one thing. And then final, my question is, given your background in Silicon Valley and what we see happening with, quote unquote, big tech now, not just AI, but just the the mind's, it's like the extreme version of everything wrong. It's totally outer and it's totally reductionist. And I'm just curious how you see that, how we can change that, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll keep my answers mostly to the first part because we need to bring in Jude and Lene, I think, if I pronounce that correctly. So many people, maybe some people don't know, but I had a really bad kind of cancer 6 years ago now, and I had to prepare for death because my survival chances were really minimal. And I think partially because I had such a deep mindfulness practice, that certainly had an influence on my survival. And during that year where I really struggled very, very hard to survive, I was able to go very, very deep in the exploration of who I really am. And John, thanks for pointing out that it changed me, right? And clearly, I don't believe that you have to go through such a huge crisis in order to change yourself, but it certainly,
Oh, good.
is a push, and I was lucky enough or maybe aware enough to use that crisis in order to go very much deeper in that question of who am I really and what is my role to play, if there is a role, if and what should I do while I prepare for dying. And the detachment of your own life is the ultimate detachment that you have to make, and it's the most difficult one because and I had to go through the sad realization that all these great things that I thought that only I could do will go on without me, and so that helped me get a little bit more perspective on my own ego, and and maybe Silicon Valley, and then we go over to the other questions. Um, I still have, I've been trying to figure out what happened to Silicon Valley in the last few months, and I start understanding now that it actually started changing a few years ago. And since I'm not part of that crowd anymore, I didn't see it. I didn't see that from the outside. I was just really surprised about people showing up at the inauguration and leaving all their values in order to make more money, and it's really quite disturbing on one level, but it also shows you who are the players. And right now is the time where the so-called people who claim that they're carrying on a deeper level, well, you see where they end up, and most of them don't, unfortunately. And we can talk about what happened because it's a very interesting development, and I don't even, like I said, understand all of it, but it has to do with the egos of the billionaires, right? And clearly, and the consciousness and the awareness of that crowd. And I leave it at this because we want to bring in everybody else as well. And if we have some time, then we can talk about that, or John, we can talk about it offline as well. Is it Lene or
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me moderate, Charlie.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah. So yes, so we perceive this Titanic behavior in Silicon Valley rather than understand the bigger picture. Lene, please go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you. So besides being an economist, I also studied theology. And what I hear you saying is a postmodern theology of individual subjective spiritual experiences. And my question to you is, how is that different from the individualism that has created all the problems that we're in? Because the Western mind cannot see the wholeness and the connection with others. And part of what we have in the traditional religions, including Buddhism, where I think you got most of your practices from, are actually community building. So what I haven't heard you talk about other people for the whole presentation. And when I hear people talk about mindfulness, it's usually about themselves. So I wonder, what kind of community do you imagine? And I would also like to ask the other members whether we should have an actual theological debate with some theologians from the different traditions, because there is so much knowledge and language that we have obviously lost in the West because we have secularized ourselves. I mean, one of the things that you were basically talking about is what was mentioned in the New Testament as metanoia, which is going to the other side of your mind and turning around to become a different kind of person. So we have this. We also have it in the Western tradition, and so there's one question for you, and there's one question for the Club of Rome, and whether we should enter into this kind of realm and topic.
Yeah, thank you for this, and I agree with most of what you say, or everything. To me, it's not my experience is my experience, and many different people have different experiences. There's many different ways of tuning into this, what I would say, universal knowledge. So it's not my knowledge. It's every spiritual tradition has a. I'm talking to my mom. She's Roman Catholic, and she prays a lot, and prayers. On that level, she's very spiritual, not just with the church. And so that's her access to the same truths that I experienced, from a different angle, and many different religions. When you go to the spiritual side of the religions, they have similar ways of accessing that. And so while I talked about my experiences, I think these experiences are accessible to anybody who chooses ways of accessing that, which includes many different practices. And we need to be able to, and we need to be careful not to say this is the only way to access that. But the tuning in, I think, is more important than saying I know what the truth is, and you have to experience it yourself, and then we can create a community on that one. So that would be sort of my comments, and it's well worth exploring that from different angles, and not just doing one mindfulness practice to get to that diversity. Yes.
And the question to the Club of Rome, which I'm sure Paul and others will respond, I'd like to add my comment to that, to Lena's question, whether the Club of Rome should enter this field or not. Whether the Club of Rome enters this field or not, this field is present, is part of the true, the good, and the beautiful, the Platonic values. So it's part of who we are. Whether we discuss it, access it, apply it, work, evolve together, or individually within this true, good, and beautiful, it's only to our detriment if we do not use all the true, the good, and the beautiful aspects. So I'd like to hand over to Jude. Hi, dear friend.
Hi, Mariana. Thank you, Charly and Mariana. I think we've already started this conversation. Paul kindly invited me to have a fireside chat with him back in March. And the theme was how a unitive perspective can empower transformational change. And the point there was this is no longer theologic. This is actually based on evidence at all scales of existence and across many fields of research. That are converging with spiritual traditions and universal wisdom teachings, but it is grounded on evidence basis at all scales, to the extent that some of you may be aware that in 2022, the Nobel Prize of Physics was given for universal, what's called non-locality, in other words, a holistic universe, and that's only given for settled science. So in that fireside chat, which sort of began a seeding of this, I also shared a lot of evidence-based foundations. But Paul asked the main question, which is what if so, what then? Because it's wonderful to have this perspective, and I agree with Charly. Inner experience of this is often vital to really deepen that. But Paul's question was, what does it mean in the world? And that was why the theme began to say, how can this empower transformational change? And that obviously did the tag team into John, because this is his foundational work with regenerative economics. And then to go now into Charly and Mariana's perspective of the inner and the outer, the being and the doing, I think is key. And I hope and trust that with all of us, Carlos certainly, and Paul, and some of us on this call, that we can form a coalition of the willing to explore this. But I really want to emphasize that, first of all, this is not beyond the remit of science. Secondly, that this is being rediscovered through the remit of science. Thirdly, that it has foundational transformational implications in the world. And fourthly, in my perspective, what it does, it helps to do, is perhaps reframe what we were calling a meta-crisis. Of course, in Chinese glyph, crisis is danger and opportunity. But to reframe a meta-crisis as a metamorphosis, with all the turbulence, but with the evolutionary potential and emergence that I feel, remembering who we really are as microcosms of a unitive world, that we can go forward together. And I would say that this is not unity and uniformity. It's unity and radical diversity, and there are many paths up the mountain. So I'm just grateful for this conversation of the Club of Rome to open us all up to this potential possibility.
Thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. Those of you who need to go, you may leave. The hour is full. We have one more question, raised hand by Paul. So Charly, can you take that one more? Yeah. Paul,
Well,
why don't you go ahead?
It's not a question for Charly. It's more an answer to Lene. But I do want to acknowledge, Charly, what you have shared with us is so profound and so meaningful. It has stunned me into silence. And then my life here is a little complicated today. I've been jumping between several Zoom calls, all of them dealing with the Club of Rome, and listening to lots of complaints and crises that are happening in different parts of our empire, the Club of Rome empire. But let me say this, to Lene's question of whether this is within the remit of the Club of Rome. First of all, just look at the screen. I mean, these are people who've been talking about these issues for years. We are not 114 on the screen yet. We are just 12, but we are a committed 12 people who have brought the inner self, the unitive perspective, and all that is outside of the rational grasp of humans. I think not only is this within the remit of the Club of Rome, it is a black hole that the Club of Rome has not peered into for a very long time, hiding behind the rational. We are very good at material analysis. We are very good at analytics, modeling. We have developed methods and epistemologies that are all delivering very high quality rational outputs. What is lacking up till now is that aesthetic, the emotional, the sensing, the feeling, all of which is part of being human to me. So if we want to strive for that kind of holistic understanding that everybody is calling for in a different way. Jude has probably done the most work to bring the natural sciences from physics to cosmology into this conversation. But many of you here, I have known for many, many years, have been struggling to find words to convey to our rational colleagues that there is this duality of being human that we have not fully captured in our discourse. So I am hoping that in the coming years, we'll be able to flesh that out more fully. And I feel really lucky that we have Lene and others with philosophical grounding, and Julia with grounding in mindfulness practices that are very deep, and Jude and others who can hold our hands to take us into this new adventurous space. So I'm very excited on the one side, and yet humbled by how little I can offer you from my own insight. So thank you for doing this fireside chat. Thank you, Mariana, for coordinating it. And thanks to all of you for being part of it.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and an honor to see you. On and upwards and onwards. Take care.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
Mariana and Charly. Good to see everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Guys, thanks, Mariana. Good to see you all.